Okay, so we know one thing that the trees have to try to tell this couple, these two people who've met under the trees. And that first thing is that merely being there means something, which plays off of the earlier phrase, still performance, speech as a still performance. The second thing that the trees say, because we've got a colon, then one that clause, then a semicolon and a second that clause, is what, Anna? That soon we may touch, love, explain. Explain.
I think touch, love, explain kind of takes us through in a very condensed sense the different sort of stages of a relationship. That touch maybe refers to kind of physical proximity, physical closeness, physical love.
More than
even.
Proximity, yeah.
Love, once you kind of transcend that, just like...
You go, touch is context, sex. Right. Love.
Kind of like what comes after that. Like, well, love is like not just wanting to be there physically, but, wanting to be there the next morning and make breakfast. That's love to me.
Not to use a 21st century cliche at all.
No, of course not.
So touch is a first order.
Love is
Love is the second order.
That's maybe.
And now, isn't it interesting that John Ashbery, speaking of love, I just love this man. Explain is the third order. Wow. Go ahead, make some profound thing out of that.
Nice.
As long as it doesn't refer to breakfast in the morning, a cigarette afterwards.
I already blew it on the first two, so let's see what I can do with this.
Touch, love, explain.
Explain, I guess, kind of to me means a desire to, I see the world my way, I'm going to tell you how I see it.
Yeah, suppress the tendency to overread, back off, and say it in a phrase. What is explain?
Explain is...
You said it, but you said it in fancy words.
This is how I see it. This is what I see. This is what this means to me. This is, it's kind of a desire.
How does explanation come in our lives?
Explanation.
Through what medium?
Maybe teaching. This is how you do algebra. This is how you...
But in this love context?
In the love context, it's Amaris.
What?
How about, she's getting out of this. How about talk?
Just talking?
Talking. Come on now, let's just go with your cliches about love. The morning after stuff. First one touches, sexual contact, then love, which is a higher than eros, and then explain is talking. That's I think what he's saying here is that the trees are saying, I don't know how the trees know this, but they're saying that first there's sorry, you don't have to do this, but that'll stand in. First there's the incidental contact, which is an accident, really. It's like a one-night stand for a stand of trees. Then there's something greater. What could be greater than love? And then for Ashbery, we get to what, Amaris? What do we get to?
Well, I was thinking back to that idea of meeting and encounter as being far from the world. So the world provides us with a set list of definitions and ways of using language, but he says that touching and loving has to precede any sort of effective communication. So there seems to be a need for an intuitive understanding.
So explanation is language.
But yeah,
it's
the
highest order of relationship is language. I just find that to be terribly moving, especially for so young a poet to have thought that. And glad not to have invented such comeliness. Did we have that? Did I assign that?
It's me.
And what does that mean? That's a funny...
Well, the comeliness, the beauty of it, is given as opposed to having to somehow be created by, and it's moving for someone who's, making this poem, to appreciate and be thankful for that given beauty. It's there, it's real.
The trees, yeah. I'm so glad I didn't have to invent this beauty. It's a funny thing to say. Well, we were relieved we didn't have to invent this fabulous scene. But glad, in that way, we are surrounded. Did I give that to anybody? I don't think so. So what do we do with that? there's a cause and effect relationship there, and Ashbery is so great at messing around with cause and effect. Because we were happy about not having to create this given beauty, because of that, we are surrounded.
I guess you can just be surrounded by it. That's all you just have to be.
In a way, we're kind of like the trees right now, the two of us, right? A still performance. A silence already filled with noises. Again, that's still performance we were getting earlier. And now another instance, a canvas on which emerges a chorus of smiles. What is that? That's hard. Anybody want to take a shot at that? Dave?
Just another paradox. Just a chorus of smiles.
Chorus would be a musical trope, and a canvas is a place where we put something depictive, visual. We have a canvas on which emerges a chorus of smiles. I mean, I've thought about this poem an awful lot, so I'll just say what I think about this, which is that the chorus of... I'm seeing Ashbery ut pictura poesis, as in painting, so in poetry. The relationship between painting and poetry for the New York School is very vital. And this is sort of an incidental version of that, where I see on a canvas a chorus of smiles. I almost see the somewhat semicircular strokes. Here are the trees being drawn, right? A chorus of smiles. A winter morning, the chorus of smiles would be the few leaves, A winter morning, placed in a puzzling light and moving. Who's got moving?
I do. I think first the puzzling reminds me back of amazing. Maybe it's the Z's, but they both seem to play off each other. But moving, I think, goes back to the still performance and also means emotionally moving.
Right, it means both those things. First moving refers to the trees and their kind of flowy relationship, right? Can we do that one more time? Right, so that's moving. And what's moving is the relationship, the dance of relationship. Together, distance from the world, together, touching, loving, explaining. So we learn that moving relationship from the trees. And secondly, emotionally moving, powerful.
It could be the moving, the progression, touch, love, explain.
Our days put on such reticence, these accents seem their own defense. This is such a fabulously, almost incomprehensible and opaque couple of lines. So Emily, our days put on such reticence. First of all, there's that idiom. We don't put on reticence usually. First of all, what's reticence?
Reticence is being quiet, withholding, retaining something.
Right, right.
It's in some way, it's the opposite of explaining. It's the antithesis to the type of higher order relationship he's talking about.
So it's shyness, which might have something to do with this emerging relationship, but it's also a kind of unwillingness or incapacity to say a lot. And that fits with this poem so far. How?
That unwillingness to speak is, and to some extent, an unwillingness to engage in this transcendent relationship he's talking about.
Okay. Our days put on such reticence. Max, can you just paraphrase that line? Put on our days. Our daily...
Our
days.
routines create this air. I mean, just to go to what Emily was saying, the reticence is here in opposition to explanation, perhaps that highest order of love, that their days, our daily routines just create this sort of air of reservation, of sort of avoiding this moment that this sort of really profound, insightful moment that he just has,
And so if we didn't know he was a postmodern poet who's really focused on language and idiom and torquing common sense, we would think this really fits with the nature poem. The idea that we can stand by the trees, and if we just stop talking and be quiet and reticent, we will hear the trees telling us about relationship. It's obviously more than that, but that's one of the things you get here. Because of that, Amaris, these accents seem their own defense. What does that mean? I love that line. What does it mean?
The way I interpreted defense was it seems to create an opposition in spaces or in languages, so standard language versus poetic language perhaps. And so he's created this space far from the world in the poem, and I think the accents refer to maybe the accents of light of understanding that we've gleaned from it.
It's very nice.
By thinking of it associatively.
That's very nice. Let's go a little further. Anybody ever hear of a defense of poetry? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Well, Sidney wrote a defense of poesy, and Shelley wrote one too. It becomes an ars poetica. It becomes a way of saying why poetry is important to us. A defense of poetry. Okay, so these accents seem their own defense is a kind of way of saying, the fancy word one would use is autotelic. Right? This is a way of saying that the poetry means what it means in itself and doesn't need any external, biographical, historical, contextual information in order to mean. It means because it is what it is. Right? So these accents seem their own defense in that context could mean what?
I think it places emphasis on the musicality of it as well. It's again removing us from that semantic space into a sound space.
All you need to do is hear the lyricism of this poem. The way I read it, I emphasized the lyricism. Ashbery, who reads in a monotone, doesn't emphasize the lyricism, but I did. So you hear this absolutely gorgeous prose that if you look at it once means nothing. What does he mean? What is he saying? Why does he mess up these idioms? Why is he speaking so incomprehensibly? And of course, the answer is in the poem, which is a defense of poetry, which is that if you listen and actually used, meaning less systematically, less conventionally, in the sound of that itself, you will hear a defense of what we do, and that is the relationship. These accents seem their own defense. Let's push on accents just a little more. Anybody? Accents? Amaris said it referred to the sound of the poem.
I also think when you kind of look at it on maybe a slightly smaller scale in terms of perhaps the two individuals in the poem, accents are things that are variable. Not everyone has the same accent. So it's kind of maybe pointing to that arbitrariness.
Okay, so you're referring to the way we talk and the way we stress accents. If you were to do a metrical study of this poem, what would you do with your pen?
You'd put accent marks where the stresses fall.
And what would the accent mark look like?
Like
an accent. It would come from the top right to the bottom left. An accent, right? So, and glad not to have invented such comeliness, we are surrounded. A silence already filled with noises. A canvas on which emerges a chorus of smiles. There are your accents. These accents, Max, these accents. Go, man.
We're back to these.
Yeah, but well, now it's these accents.
Well, this is where it's great how these is the first word of the first line and the last line, and so he's taking us back to the these that we
so
first
what are the
presumed
accents?
Were the trees.
Yes, are not just the trees.
But the lines of the poem.
The lines of the poem.
Yeah.
These accents seem their own defense. So I am going to read the poem again by way of conclusion, right? And I want you to hear the accents. I don't mean accents like the metrics. I want you to hear the lyricism of the poem and forget about the fact that it doesn't make conventional sense. And then draw the conclusion that the trees tell us, which is, one imagines the trees doing a somewhat still performance. They're whispering to us. Say, relate. Meaning comes from relation. The relation is arbitrary. These accents are the defense of poetry. This is all you need. Here we go. I'll just say that Ashbery wrote this in 1948. I think he was 22 years old. He was a senior in college, just so you can be jealous. Some trees. These are amazing, each joining a neighbor as though speech were a still performance. Arranging by chance to meet as far this morning from the world as agreeing with it, you and I are suddenly what the trees try to tell us we are. That their merely being there means something. That soon we may touch, love, explain. And glad not to have invented such comeliness, we are surrounded. A silence already filled with noises. A canvas on which emerges a chorus of smiles. A winter morning. Placed in a puzzling light and moving Our days put on such reticence, these accents seem their own defense. When I read what seems to be incomprehensible poetry, and we're going to get some of that in the chapter 9, all I can think of is maybe I should just attend to the words and listen better. And then my relationship, the you and I relationship that is potentially the poet and the reader, gets formed by the Sid Corman-like arbitrary connection that we have. And in a sense, Ashbery is saying, stay with me. We have left the world, and we are now in the poem, and we have a connection. If I detain you, you will understand what I mean.